Call to order. Welcome everyone to the meeting of the Board of Selectmen for January 6th, 2015. And we're going to start tonight with a Governor Stoughton meeting. We had an error on the agenda initially. We inadvertently left off an agenda item for meeting of the Governor Stoughton trustees. So we've since reposted it and added it in on the advice of Town Council. We are entertaining a request for a further extension of the due diligence period. Now, because it was not fully noticed for the 48-hour period, we're going to just grant a short-term extension tonight until our next meeting, and then take up the issue at the next meeting. So our next meeting, I believe, everyone's free on the 13th, which is next Tuesday. So do we have a motion to extend the due diligence period until January 13th?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Bill, is there anything that you wanted to add regarding this
I
request?
just want you to take in, use these two for the next meeting and just get ready to discuss the definition of a buffer zone. Done.
Okay. And that's relative to the request for the due diligence
Yes.
extension period. Is there anything else on this, anyone?
No.
And all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous. So we'll adjourn the Governor Stoughton trustees meeting. Thank you, Bill. And we are on to the Board of Selectmen's meeting. We're going to take a couple of items out of order so that we can have our DPW Director, Joe Lynch, who has to leave early, join us at the start. So, Joe, would you like to come up and join us at the table? Why don't we start with number 8, which is your technical assistance grant. Good evening, Joe.
Thank you. You may recall that we had sought out permission this past October and then again last year to participate in a Community Innovation Challenge grant. We received that grant last year. We had our applications submitted in time this year, except the program fell to the governor's 5C cuts and has been eliminated. The consortium that we belong to, that groups together to look at that stormwater initiative, feel that there's still a possibility that we could move forward in what's called a technical assistance grant through the MAC, Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. So we're asking, again, I guess really two things, is to not necessarily revoke the prior approval, just simply it's not needed anymore because the grant program's not there. But more importantly, to extend your authorization for us to participate in the technical assistance grant. At this point in time, there is likely to be a local pledge amount of $5,000. It's the same amount that we were looking to pledge under the other program, so we would just carry that same funding over to this new program.
And there is no pledge for the second one, right?
There is. I mean, right now it's not identified, but there likely might be. So I think the authorization would to also authorize us to expend that $5,000 should the match be necessary.
And they're both $45,000 grants, or?
The technical assistance grant is really a services grant. It's not really an expenditure of funds.
Okay, gotcha.
Right, we're getting services out of the association.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve a request from the Department of Public Works to apply for 2 MAPC technical assistant grants to further the pilot study of creating a stormwater utility in Milton as follows. 1, in conjunction with the Neponset Stormwater Partnership pledging the same $5,000 match previously pledged to the CIC grant project, and 1 with no financial match necessary, and to authorize the town administrator to sign letters of support for both grant applications.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Good job, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, Joe is also here for number 5, which is a continued hearing on an unbilled sewer charge for 329 Canton Avenue. I don't see the applicant, Mary Moore, here tonight. She was contacted by this office and indicated that she may not be able to attend tonight.
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Should we take this up at this time rather than waiting further?
I say we move ahead.
Okay. All right. Then, Joe, if you'd like to stay in case we have any further questions, why don't I, so we'll reconvene the hearing for the 329 Canton Avenue unbilled sewer charges. Was there anyone else who was here tonight on this topic, either on behalf of Ms. Moore or the estate or anyone else? None. Okay. Then, when we met last in December, we We had a lengthy discussion with Ms. Moore, who is the executor of the estate of her parents, who lived at 329 Canton Avenue. The house has been sold. We understand that the funds for the approximately $5,500 in unbilled sewer charges for the past 4-year period, 4 out of 6 years, 6 years being the length of time that we can go back under our unbilled sewer policy, are being held in an escrow account by the closing attorney who handled the sale of the home. Ms. Moore did not live there. This is her parents' home. She was there. She was here representing their estate, and she raised a couple of issues which related to essentially fairness, that the policy in general was unfair, and more specifically, that she believed the retroactive application of the policy was unfair. And Ms. Moore indicated that she had contacted the DPW. She mentioned, Joe, that she had had a conversation with you at one point sometime last year. She understood that the charges would not be collected retroactively. It would only be a prospective application. And I understand that that's not your recollection of the conversation.
There was no conversation that took place.
Okay.
Not to any extent, but there was no conversation whatsoever.
Between you and Ms. Moore?
That's correct.
Okay. I suppose it's possible she spoke with someone else in your department?
I've asked folks in my department if they had any other conversation. There's really only 2 other people in the department who handle situations regarding the water and sewer issue. And one is in our central business office who had no conversation with that person and until after the appeal period. And another person who is working in my department directly, who's handling the day-to-day investigation piece of it, and he had no conversation with that person.
I suppose, had it even, at the time that it happened, there was no agreement in place to back charge it in any event, I don't believe, right? At that point, all we were
as selectmen, you recall just how cautious we were as we were
Right.
crafting the policy.
We didn't have a policy in place at the time.
We didn't have a policy in place, but through the entire process of crafting it, it was always the thought that we were going back some
period of time.
distance in time, whether it was the full extent of all of the years, whether it was to the non-disputable amount of 6 years that ultimately came out of the process of town council's research, or then ultimately what the amnesty program might ultimately offer for relaxation. It was never contemplated that we'd go back and collect nothing.
Right.
Okay. What we've been able to determine, my understanding through talking with Michael Blanchard, is that the home was connected to sewer at the time it was built, I believe 1979. So for about 35 years, it's been connected to town sewer. At the time that the connection was made, there was no separate billing for sewer charges. I've had a conversation with a great Milton institution, former town administrator John Cronin, who gave me a little bit of history on this and has said that at one time sewer was billed through the property tax, and it was never a separate bill until sometime after Proposition 2.5 came into effect in the 1980s. There was a committee headed up by former moderator Rick Ward that handled the conversion to a separate billing system, and it sounds like it was a very detailed process that took place and a lot of work by a committee that went into effect. But in any event, the home has been connected to town sewer for a long time, so and the charges had not been billed, we believe, through clerical error at whatever town department it was. So we should emphasize there's no fault alleged by the estate, by Ms. Moore's parents. And she presented a sympathetic case. Both of her parents died within a very short time period. She's had a very difficult year. Obviously, I think we can all understand how difficult the circumstances must be with 2 parents dying within a month of each other. And she had been assisting them with handling their bills. Her mother was blind. She gave a lot of testimony about the situation that she was dealing with over the last several years, I believe. The question that came up at the time, at the last meeting, was whether the sprinkler system in the home would be a cause for any relief. And she indicated there's no separate meter. Sometimes if you have a sprinkler, in order to avoid sewer charges, you put it on a separate meter so that it doesn't incur those costs, because that water it's going into the ground, but it's not really impacting the sewer, and there's no reason for sewer charges on those. Joe can correct me if I'm misstating anything here. we've looked into that issue. I know, Tom, you raised the point
Yep.
that maybe that's something worth looking into. And my understanding is the policy of the town, and Joe can speak to this, is that we don't normally, if a person does not have a second meter installed for a sprinkler system, there have been many requests for abatement of sewer charges, but they're never granted.
I can't speak, prior to my arriving in town here, but I can tell you that it's been conveyed to me that it was a long-standing practice way before I got here, but since I've been here, we deal with dozens, if not 100 cases of this type of inquiry every single year, and we have never, not often, we have never adjusted a sewer bill under those circumstances. What we have done, and we do it under very carefully documented situation where a plumbing problem has happened, a leakage that can be documented. Plumber came in and repaired it with a bill, and we can determine that failure, whether it's an outside pipe or an outside faucet, if we can determine that we have in fact granted relief for sewer charges under that documented circumstances, and only those documented circumstances. So that's not the case that's happened here. And we do have, in fact, I spoke with a gentleman this morning, completely unrelated, on the exact same situation.
So just to sum up where we are for the board, we have a request for some relief based on a fairness argument. There has not been an allegation that there's any inability to pay, and clearly the funds are sitting in an escrow account, so the funds are available. We're seeking to go back for a 4-year period, so the policy itself provided a 2-year amnesty for the initial round of properties that were discovered. I believe it was around 22 homes, and also for anyone else who's subsequently discovered, or actually before they're subsequently discovered, anyone who comes forward voluntarily, because it saves us some administrative work, Joe, your department in particular, of having to go out and run tests or do some follow-up and check into the situation. So the $5,500 represents approximately 4 years of sewer charges. The home has had the benefit of sewer service for 35 years, and we could go back 6 years. We're going back 4 years, and the applicant, on fairness grounds, has asked for further relief. And so I think the discussion for us tonight is where although Ms. Moore couldn't be here, she did give extensive testimony, is not the right word, but she gave a lot of information to us at the last meeting.
Yeah, I guess under the policy that we created, the only leeway we gave for relief was either hardship, or there was an error in the charge somehow, that the property was acquired later than that, or some other problem with it. There was nothing for, unfortunately, sprinkler relief. So I don't think there's anything within the policy that would give us the ability, without going totally against the policy that we've written, to give any relief here.
I agree with that, despite the circumstances that Ms. Moore's in. And again, she is not a resident of the town. She did not have as much notice of this retroactive look-back period as others who live in town might have. So understand that when she got the bill, she was surprised by it. My view would be the same, that there's not grounds under the policy in this particular case. There's not an inability to pay that's been alleged. Fairness is something we took into consideration when we created the policy about a year ago. It was adopted finally in the spring, but we met during the course of the winter months.
But is inability to pay, is that a reason to give relief?
If it's shown,
financial hardship.
Yeah, she hasn't alleged that. She's alleged fairness. And again, the funds are available in an escrow account.
I think if I may, the policy says that means testing formula shall be established. So given a criteria established, which I don't know if that's happened, but if there's means testing, it would allow not so much forgiveness, but maybe it's a restructuring of a repayment plan. Basically, it leaves it open to you people to consider. But I think the first piece is means testing.
This is the first appeal we've had, and there has been a preliminary appeal with Mr. Blanchard, the Assistant Town Administrator, who denied the request, and the applicant brought it to this board.
When Mr. Blanchard interviewed the applicant, I'm wondering, and he's sitting over here, I'm wondering if you did ask that question about some relief because of inability to pay? Did you ask that question?
Michael, just for the sake of the microphones, would you like to come up to the table? Thank you.
I'd have to review the tape. I don't recall that specific line of questioning. It wasn't alleged in her initial, appeal, and she didn't bring it up. I don't recall asking that specific question, though, no.
I'm just wondering if that was one of your criteria, that's one of your questions that you would ask, if any future people come in front of you.
Certainly, we could be more specific. Generally, again, this was the only hearing, but I essentially just opened it up to her to provide any information, any testimony, again, that's not a great word, and left it up to her to present her case.
Well, I mean, I know I brought this up at the last meeting, but, I kind of had a change of heart. Once I started reading into it, yes, they did have the 30 years of unbilled sewer charges, and we are only going back 4, which I think is probably very fair, considering we could go back 6. If we start granting relief and plus they sold the house, so there's absolutely no financial hardship, I believe, and they're not town residents. So, in my opinion, at this stage, I think we should deny it and just move forward.
That seems to be the sense of the board, so would someone like to make a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to not grant relief under the request for abatement of the water and sewer charges, or the sewer charge for the 4-year period.
Second.
Any further discussion? Then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Okay, Joe, thank you very much for staying. Michael, thanks for
Michael.
joining us tonight. Okay, we are now going to return to the top of the agenda, and we have meeting minutes for 3 dates in November to approve.
I move approval of November 12th, 2014 minutes.
I'll second. I just have one change on November 12th, and it's just, it might be a typo. It's number 5. Cheryl Flightman, representing Boston Fair Skies, updated the board on runway 4L instead of just
Oh,
L.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay,
It makes a difference, I think.
okay. Any other changes? You seconded that, Dennis?
I second it, yeah.
Okay.
I
so-
just had one question on number 11, and you can answer this. Is this correct? Is this a correct amount, Tom and Katie, that the 67,000?
Yes.
That was in addition to the original amount
Yes.
approved?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
That was confusing.
Okay, then,
I'm good.
with those changes, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. November 19th.
Move approval of November 19th, 2014 minutes.
Second.
Changes, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And November 26th.
Finally, move approval of November 26th, 2014 minutes.
Second.
Any changes or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, future meeting dates. We're scheduled to meet on January 13th, which is a week from tonight. You're also, I sent an email, at the request of the chairman of the Town Government Study Committee. I was at their meeting last night. We can talk more about that when we get to the warrant articles. But that committee scheduled a meeting, well, they chose 3 dates in order to have a joint meeting with us, with a representative of the Mass Municipal Association, to discuss the Strong Town Administrator article. The first date that was available is Monday, January 12th, the night before our next meeting, at 6 o'clock.
I can't make any Mondays, but, I mean, go ahead. You guys can go ahead with it.
Are you sure about that? I know Paula
Absolutely.
communicated that to me, but
I mean, you're going to discuss writing an article for the May town meeting with regards to a strong town administrator, right?
Correct.
yeah, we're going to discuss the recommendation.
The recommendation, yeah.
The article's already been drafted by John Flynn, but the recommendation is going to be based on the job descriptions. And I brought copies of the job description from 2 years ago, but Rick Neely's also going to be sending us a more updated one that
Right.
they discussed last night that we have not yet seen, and I didn't receive it this afternoon. I think they had a lot of work to do today on the articles with a lot of follow-up, so we'll probably get that tomorrow or Thursday.
Yeah, I'm okay with you, with not attending it on Monday. You guys can go ahead.
If that's okay with you.
I'm fine with
And
that.
Tom, you have a capital meeting earlier in the evening, but.
Yeah, but I should be able to be there.
Okay, and the town administrator is free also.
Yes, I'm also free.
Paula, are you available that night? Oh, sure. Okay, all right. We can't meet without Mrs. Rizzi. All right, so we'll meet then on Monday, the 12th, at 6 o'clock. We need to reserve a conference room, probably the Blute Room for that, given the number of people.
Yeah,
We'll
probably.
figure that out, what's available. And we'll meet on the 13th. The 20th, I
20th
believe, is the
Conservation
Conservation
Commission.
Commission hearing. So did we want to meet another night that week? You know, we're avoiding the last week in January.
Wednesday, the 21st, Madam Chair, we will have to meet to sign the new bonds, the repurposed bonds.
Say that again, Emery?
We will have to meet on January 21st. We will be, the board will have to sign some new bonds.
Oh, yeah.
We are going out and
Is that the only
refunding.
reason for meeting, or do we have anything else on the agenda?
we don't have anything else on the agenda at this
We
point.
haven't
but
scheduled anything
you-
for that night yet, but there's,
I'm
So-
sure there's always
Yeah.
something.
yeah, I think
that
we're
will
going to
pop,
have a
but-
lot. We're trying to schedule the sign review committee to come in and
I'm available.
some other things. The 21st?
First,
Okay, so let's schedule then January 12th, 13th, and 21st.
okay.
13th and the 21st at 7 PM and 6 PM on the 12th. Okay, next item is payroll and vendor warrants.
Move approval of the current payroll and vendor warrants.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, citizen speak. I know we have a few people here to talk with us tonight at Citizen Speak. Cindy Christensen is first. Good evening, Cindy.
Hi.
Cindy?
Hi. Hi, Tom. I'm Dr. Cindy Christensen. I live at 59 Colomar Street, and I'm a town meeting member for Precinct 7. The day after Christmas, I was in a passenger seat of my sister's car going the short distance from my home in East Milton to East Milton Square. At 3 four-way stop intersections, we stopped, but the drivers in cars going another direction ran right through the intersection. After this happened the third time, my sister asked me if STOP means something different in Milton than in the rest of the country. I had to admit that in East Milton, many drivers think it means GO and go with almost no worries of being stopped and ticketed. This happened on the side streets east of the highway, but the traffic on Granite Ave and Bryant Boulevard also posed substantial risk, particularly for pedestrians. Even though many residents in East Milton have made known their concerns about these traffic and pedestrian dangers, the chief recently wrote that he talked with the school committee to let them know that he knew of nothing dangerous in East Milton Square. There are no crossing guards for public school children and their parents who need to cross Granite Ave and Bryant Boulevard. Many of us routinely experience a near miss when in the crosswalk in front of the post office, and even drivers tell stories of the dangers for people and cars in this area. One of your department heads recently commented that Milton Police Department doesn't issue more tickets because people in Milton don't want them to. If this is true, I'd like to know who gets to make this decision to not enforce the laws that would make our neighborhood safer. You want development in our neighborhood, I do too, but make sure we are protected and have the same services as other parts of town, from street paving to street cleaning, and even more importantly, traffic and parking enforcement and police protection around the highway and in our neighborhood streets. Ask the question, how many moving violations were issued in East Milton last month? What about last year? Make this part of your reporting requirements. No longer accept the response, there's nothing we can do, or let's form a committee, or let's have another meeting to discuss this, or this will all be better when the parking project is complete. If it's lack of police resources, take the officer who now posts weather reports, ways to fix broken pipes, and gives guidance on how parents should dress their children for Halloween off of police department Facebook duties and onto traffic patrol. Please do something now to make East Milton and our neighborhood streets safer from these traffic violators without making residents make one more phone call, write one more email, attend one more meeting, or come to one more citizen speak. Other towns figure out preventative actions to take. Why can't the employees of this town do the same? My suggestion is to try strategic and persistent police enforcement as a preventative measure. But whatever you do, do something. Let's not wait for the first pedestrian injury or death to rally our resources and community values in an attempt to prevent the second. Expect your police department to do something now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Cindy. Citizen speak. Who else would like to address the board at citizen speak? Good evening, Harriet.
Good evening. Good
Hello.
evening. Very briefly. My name is Harriet Manning, and I would like to speak briefly concerning the Swift Hat House and its preservation. The Swift Hat House is located in Milton Village. There are two other concerned citizens besides myself who are acting as an informal committee to save the Swift House from demolition. We feel that there have been too many historical structures in Milton that have been demolished in the past few years. Our original goal was to bring the plight of this house to the attention of both the Milton public and to the leaders of our town. We feel that we have achieved part of this goal. Now we are asking what the next steps will be and what we can do as this informal committee to move this project along. Any suggestions of further action would be appreciated. We would also like to know if a decision has been made as to which town department has responsibility for the lot to which the house may in time be moved. Thank you for your time and consideration in this important town matter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet.
Harriet.
Hi,
Good evening, Janet.
I'm Janet Christensen, lifelong resident, et cetera, town meeting member. And
What's your
I'm
street address, Janet, just for the
24
record?
Gordon Road, East Milton.
Thank you.
Okay, so I couldn't enlarge the print. Something was wrong on my printer. But I do want to say that I'm in the same group as Harriet, and we have a fledgling committee growing. We have a lawyer, actually, in our group. We also have one of the Ophils from Theo Nursery in our group. And we have a very nice person back here, Joanna Spinks, who's been very active lately in finding a good recommendation for our cause through the Samantha State Historic Commission. Is that correct? I think that's the name of it. Okay, but at any rate, this year would be the 225th anniversary of that house, because it's the oldest commercial building in this category, this commercial category, and so that is quite remarkable that it's the 225th anniversary. Okay, we want to capture the interest of Milton residents, many of them, and we want to get the communication out about the history and facts and find new partners, and we're working on it. We would like to raise funds, and in the past I have done a 501c3 for a state agricultural group, so I know how to do it. We also, as I said, have a lawyer on our small growing committee. But another idea is working with a local bank in town who might assist us in the process and also eventually serve as a bank that would be the one that we would, use for depositing of funds. What else can I tell you? I talked recently with Brian Doherty, chairman of the Historical Committee, and he's very interested in this project. He had several good ideas, and of course the Historic Commission is. I also talked this week to the owner of the property because he was very outgoing, and a few of us have met with him some months ago, but he was also at the Wharf Walk that you were at. So he does want to save the Swift shop, fortunately, and he owns it, but the town needs perhaps to work more with him on his other interests and ideas that he has too. So I'm not opposed, personally, I'm not speaking for the committee, to the moving of the Swift shop to another location, because where would the Suffolk Resolves House be if generous residents had not come to its rescue? And it seems to be in a very good location where it is, and a lot of things can happen there. It's good property. So there are doubtless many Milton history buffs, I believe, whose attention we can capture. And I was thinking this afternoon that actually the 5th grade history committee, with all those kids going around to the historic sites in town, how exciting it would be for young children to learn about this old property that is older than any of its kind in the country. So that's a new idea I just happen to have. And so we hope to find a way to enlist all kinds of people's support in the town for a new beginning for the Swift Hat Shop. And of course, we depend on your support and endorsement or whatever it would be. But we are a committee, we're growing, and we want to work with you if we can.
Great.
Okay? Thank
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else tonight for citizen speak? Okay, then we will move on to, we've covered number 5. We will go on to the annual town meeting articles. Okay. So we'll need a motion to close the warrant tonight, is that correct?
Well,
Or have we already, do we need to actually move to close it?
we usually do that when we sign the warrant, don't we? Yes, so that'll be at your next meeting.
Next meeting, okay. So tonight at 5:00 PM was the deadline for submitting warrant articles for the May town meeting. And we have a number of articles that have been submitted by various boards and committees, including this board. We have a citizen petition. Should we go through some of them? Mrs. Rizzi has prepared a list of articles, which she's calling Articles N1 through N17. What we're going to do, I had a conversation with the chair of the warrant committee over the weekend. When we had Brian Walsh, the town moderator, and others at our meeting a few weeks ago now, we talked about ways to improve the town meeting. One of the suggestions was that we could email the articles out to the town meeting members shortly after the warrant closes. So we're going to do that. Mrs. Rizzi and Mrs. Fagan and I have talked about how we might handle this, and I did relay our suggestion to Ted Hayes, who was in agreement with it, that we're going to compile one document of all the articles, not only the new articles, the 17 that we have in this package, but also the budget, the revolving fund, the other articles, and number them, which we usually do at the end, but number them in advance, prepare the index in advance. It's going to take us about a week to do that because the office, we have a vacant position in the office. We have a lot of articles from different sources that we need to proof and go through and get them all into one document and then figure out the numbering of them. But the warrant committee chair thought that that would be very helpful. The old practice used to be that the numbering would change sometimes, and somebody's talking about Article 17 at the warrant committee for 3 months, and then it becomes Article 43 in April right before we go to the printer, and that gets confusing. So the warrant committee was in agreement with that, and we'll try to
Just send them out to
follow
all
that
town meeting
process. Yes, and then we electronically transmit this through the town clerk's office to
Right.
town meeting members.
Right. I guess the only concern I have is you sending out the articles without any recommendations or comments on them. Some of them are straightforward. Some of them are just going to be more confusing than helpful without recommendations and comments.
They may be, but I think, well, probably, but the sense of that meeting that we had on ways to improve the town meeting was to get them out early so that there could be more discussion and people could know what's coming and watch as the process unfolds. Now the warrant committee's televised, so.
So you can send them out multiple times, with the recommendations and
Yeah, at the
maybe
end. there could be
revised
another
recommendations. So you
version.
can send them out 3 or 4 times before the actual printed one goes out.
Yeah, that's possible, yes.
Yeah,
Right, because they do evolve, obviously. I mean,
right.
and clearly at least one, the one I'm going to talk to tonight, probably will wind up having to change because we
have to,
had a conversation with our bond consultant, and it's probably not in the correct format right now.
Okay,
So,
okay. So
But that's where it will change over to
what we can
3
do
or
is
4
draft a
emails.
letter to go with it to explain that there may be changes coming.
I think it's a great idea, though.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah, I
even
mean,
recall who suggested it, but it was a
But yeah,
good
it's good to
suggestion.
get
Someone made it
information
that
out, I
meeting.
agree.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll plan to do that. It'll be about a week or so, maybe a little bit longer before it goes out to town meeting members. But in the meantime, the budget articles and the revolving funds and the other things are typically the same. I will mention, Mr. Cronin pointed out to me that we should check with town council on Articles 2, 3, and 4 that are the standard 2, 3, and 4 in the warrant every year, because one of the DOR recommendations is that, and these all relate to authorizations to the treasurer that are granted unanimously without any discussion at town meeting. The DOR report recommends that those are not needed because they're duplicative of what's already allowed by state law. So Mr. Cronin's suggestion was that we possibly remove Articles 2, 3, and 4, but we'd want to check that with town council first to make sure that he's in agreement with the DOR report. So it's possible that those may come out during the course of the next week. And the town administrator has indicated we would have a motion to approve.
Approve the
warrant articles.
The warrant and close the warrant next week.
Okay.
So you want to go through them all, Katie?
Yeah, well, we could at least go through a couple of them, or some of them, and talk about what they are. We may not want to address all of them tonight, but Article N1, why don't we just refer them as 1, 2, and 3? So the first one is to transfer the landfill access road from municipal dump purposes to general purposes. Our town planning director is here. Bill, if there's anything that you want to be heard on, feel free to come up and join us at the table. The second one is the Strong Town Administrator article. I can give a bit of an update on this one because I went to the Government Study Committee meeting last night, and at our last meeting, we talked about the fact that the approach would be that our board and the Town Government Study Committee would submit this article jointly. It's an article that asks for authorization to submit a home rule petition to determine what powers the town administrator under a strong town administrator form of government would have. Now, what we'd like, and what the warrant committee chair was in agreement with this proposal, was that we would take the next 4 to 6 weeks to propose the recommendation. So that's what our meeting on Monday night will involve. We have a job description. I brought copies of it tonight that was prepared by the Government Study Committee 2 years ago. And they are, and I didn't realize this until recently, they are preparing an updated description that we don't yet have, but we will get within the next couple of days. Does anyone need a copy of the description from 2 years? This is the number 5 is just the section of the report that is the Government Studies Committee's report from 2013. Number 5 is the recommendation, and the job description is 3 pages. And we've seen it before. We haven't discussed it recently, but they are working on an update. So in advance of Monday night's meeting, what we could do is any comments on the new version or on this current version, we could submit by email and have them available so that, because if you're not going to be able to be there Monday night, Dennis, then you may want to submit written comments in advance. Okay. One of the questions that was raised last night was we should have some sense of what the board's view is on, for example, this is an example that I think came up last night, or if not, it came up on a telephone call I had with Rick Nally, was whether the board would want to delegate to the town administrator or retain at the board level the hiring of the deputy police chief. So that's something that we'll want to discuss and see if we're on the same page with the town government study committee, and we could have a discussion about that tonight if anyone would like to. Or we could just defer the discussion until Monday night.
Better deferring it. I mean, I think we all have our opinions on it, but without giving it a little bit of thought, I think. I think as a general statement, my idea would be ultimately for the Board of Selectmen to eventually be more of a policy setting and oversight board, and let the day-to-day running of town government be that of management. So that being said, I'm probably in favor of, less is more.
And transferring something like that to the town administrator rather than to the board.
Right.
One of the questions that came up last night from the Government Study Committee meeting was, one member was asking whether there's a commonality of vision on this and whether we're all on the same page. And I told them that I think we are. We've talked a number of times over the last year and a half that I've been on the board, and we've even delegated additional duties to the town administrator. So we've talked about going towards more of a policy board and transferring more of the hiring responsibilities and other responsibilities to the town administrator to make that a quote-unquote strong town administrator role.
Right.
So it sounds like we'd have broad general agreement. There may be particular issues we'd want to talk about on Monday night, and whether their committee would be in full agreement on everything remains to be seen too, but.
Right. Right. I mean, and there's a lot of sticky issues still. I mean, number one is, attracting that person eventually that is going to be that really strong leader that you need, what that's going to cost. I mean, there's clearly a lot of issues that, that have to be thought out, and the fact that we still have somewhat of a disaggregated town government and how that fits into all that.
Well, that's a big issue, and they didn't really get into that last night, but I know that that committee has discussed that issue over time, which is that the financial management of the town is really held in different elected boards and elected officials, such as the town treasurer, who is not under this board. He's an elected official who reports to the voters. So, and one of the recommendations of the DOR is to have centralized financial management of the town. I should mention, I neglected to mention that, we've talked before about having a representative of the MMA form of government committee come out and meet with us and with the Town Government Study Committee. The person who would be coming out on Monday night is Charlie Cristello, who is a former Milton resident, has been a town administrator, I believe, in Hingham, is a former, retired now, a former town manager. He was a strong town manager. That's their form of government in Middleborough, and has a lot of experience with different types of government. The MMA told me that he's their most active speaker from this committee, visits a lot of towns. He's retired now, so he gives a lot of advice to different towns that are going through the charter change process or through form of government changes. So he is available Monday night. He's going to be joining us for the discussion and may have some helpful ideas and suggestions. A number of people from the Government Study Committee know him. Bill's nodding his head, so I'm guessing Bill knows him as well. Who doesn't Bill know in Milton?
Good point.
So he'll be probably helping us with this discussion, too. So if we can collect comments on the revised job description when we get it, I think that would be helpful.
I'll send in comments.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yep.
Anything else on this one, then, number 2? Right, number 3 is an article from the Government Study Committee about creating an audit, really appointing a new audit committee with different criteria than what's in our current bylaw.
I've had some conversations with, more email conversations, I think, also with Rick. There were some wording problems, not so much in the charge of the committee, but the selection process and the determining the scope of the audit services, just the wording was just incorrect. So I think that has been changed now to, it used generally accepted accounting principles where it should have used audit standards and that kind of thing.
They talked about that last night, and I know they were going to follow up with you on something today.
Rick did call me. I was too busy, and I never got a chance to call him back, but I did see the changed article.
Okay, so they may want you to take a look at.
And then the only other comment I have now, in terms of the charge to the committee, it's fine. I mean, it's consistent with what an audit committee would do. It doesn't have everything an audit committee would do. That was a little bit of a concern to me. But if you take a look, for example, I showed Anne Marie that City of Newton has a full-blown audit committee. It's extensive. I mean, in terms of how they get involved in town government, much more so than just reviewing the recommendations of the management letter, how they get involved in the entire internal control process, the whole whistleblower policy, just everything. They're an integral part of the internal control structure. That being said, that is a very difficult job to do. That may be very difficult to find people willing to serve in that capacity. So I think this is a good start. And like I said, it's certainly consistent with what an audit committee would do.
Okay. Would this be something we'd want to take up Monday night as well? Or are you and Rick?
I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Like I said, it's maybe it's one of those things you do in smaller steps.
One of the big changes here is that the moderator would appoint this committee rather than the Board of Selectmen.
Right, which, that's fine.
And there'd be some reporting to town meeting as well as to the board. Some of these articles we're seeing for the first time that, that we have not had before. That one, obviously, you've seen, Tom. Okay, the next one is a quorum article, again, submitted by the Town Government Study Committee. I think we just need to add that under the article.
Yep.
Okay. Number 5 is also a Government Study Committee article, and again, this is the first time I've seen this one. This is a bylaw review committee So this is another recommendation from the Department of Revenue report that came out a year and a half ago. As is number 6, which is the OPEB article. So this is to create an OPEB trust. The Government Study Committee is going ahead with this article. This is something that we've talked about at various times with the town accountant, with the town administrator. For purposes of people watching, we currently have a stabilization fund. It has about $380,000 in it, and
There's a slight advantage, and it's very slight because we're not going to be fully funding it. There's a very slight advantage because of playing with the interest rates in terms of having a permanent set-aside trust fund as opposed to a stabilization fund. That your liability will be slightly, and I mean very slightly, reduced. But basically the discount rate, if you were fully funding a trust fund as opposed to just a stabilization fund, the discount rate that you'd bring down, because you're really projecting what those benefits are out into the future and then bringing it down to today's dollars. The interest rate you use if you're having a trust is about half the interest rate that you use when you don't.
oh,
So if you're fully funding it, the liability would be down significantly.
and this is something that about a year ago we considered submitting this article, but at the time the accountant had talked, Amy had talked with the actuary who recommended that we didn't really have enough money in the stabilization fund at that time to do it. Obviously, we had another appropriation last May. So we're close to the $500,000 level. We'll probably reach that, or be very close to it at the May town meeting.
Right.
So that was really the level at which the actuaries had suggested we consider going to the trust. So this is a good recommendation by the Government Study Committee. Did you want to add anything to this one, Anne Marie?
No, that's fine. You're absolutely correct. When Parker Elmore came in and met with the board, that's exactly what he said. That at that time, we did not have enough in that stabilization fund.
And the thing to keep in mind about a trust is it's irrevocable, as opposed to a stabilization fund, which is, with 2/3 vote is revocable.
And we've talked, and probably the Government Study Committee has talked about this as well. At some point, when we finally fully fund the pension, we would be able to transfer the contribution on an annual
Right.
basis over to this OPEB trust. Okay, number 7 is the Information Technology Committee. Again, this is the Government Study Committee article. We did have an IT committee at one point. We've not had one for a number of years now. So is that the final one from the Government Study Committee?
No, the 3-5 member, is that still there, or is that old?
The 3 versus 5 member Board of Selectmen, that came up and was discussed last night. There's no article for that currently.
Okay.
The committee, I stayed for that discussion that the committee had. They had a very good discussion on it. It was quite interesting. They've done a lot of research. They had a lot of good thoughts, suggestions. I thought it was a very good debate. And what they voted was to submit an article to the October town meeting, not to the May town meeting, but to the October meeting for a 5-member Board of Selectmen. They're going to use some time in between to do some outreach, to get the word out, to do some education, to probably make known what some of the research findings are. But a couple of their members had spent quite a bit of time doing research, and I thought they had a really thorough and thoughtful discussion on this last night. So I think so those are the first 7, or the first one is with us.
Is that a charter change, or is that just available in the general law?
No, it would be a home rule petition, yeah.
And charter change?
I believe so. We haven't seen the article, but yeah, I believe so. So I think that's the last one we have from the Government Study Committee. I just want to mention, this is a committee that we and the moderator jointly appoint. We have a lot of good, thoughtful people on this committee, and they're really advancing a lot of recommendations from the DOR report. So I think that's good news, that we're not letting that report sit on a shelf. We asked them we commissioned the DOR report. We asked them the Government Study Committee, to look at these recommendations, to come back to us, to study them, and to put some articles forward, and to make recommendations to us. And they've done that, and I think they've done a very thorough job and a very good job, and they've put a lot of thought and a lot of work into this. So thank you to the Government Study Committee members who really have done an awful lot of work and put forward a good result and some good things for town meeting to take up. I think this is good news that they're moving forward on so many different topics here. Article 8 is the appropriation for the Affordable Housing Trust. So that's something that we've previously voted to submit. And,
What will the recommendation be?
well, we voted at the last meeting to request $500,000, so we'll let the warrant committee know what our request is. I think I told that to the warrant committee chair, but we'll submit it in writing. Dennis, you had raised at the last meeting that it might be a good idea to get some information as to what possibilities the trust might have.
Right, we will do that. We haven't met again since, but
Okay.
we will do that before our next meeting.
Yeah, I thought and I started putting together a memo for the warrant committee, just explaining to them why we're requesting the $500,000, what the history has been, when we created this trust, who the trustees are, when we appointed the trustees, and why we're making a request for $500,000 from one-time money. But I think what we could use for that is some information from the trust,
Itself, right.
as to what could be done with the money. And in talking with Kathleen O'Donnell and Emery Fagan yesterday, we thought that the trustees might want to consider putting together a presentation at town meeting as to, what the trust is all about, what the purposes are, what the trustees are considering. In this, I know there's not an awful lot of options, so it would be something, Tom, for your group to.
Actually, I think that's essential.
I think it is.
Yeah,
too.
no, I do.
I agree.
I totally agree.
You put a presentation that's easily understood.
Article 9, is this something that you want to address, Tom, the Yulin Rink Enterprise Fund?
Yeah, I can address it quickly. Basically, right now, we know we have a 5-year operating permit for the Yulin Rink, which is about to expire. It looks like at this point it'll probably be extended for a year. It's kind of up in the air where Curry is going from this point. We think that, and we're hopeful we'll stay on as the rink manager, but we're not sure. We've had many discussions with DCR about a 25-year lease on the property. We still think that's a possibility. But we want to, if we're going to do that, we'd like to take back more control of the rink in terms of the town's control of the rink. I think the only way we can feasibly do that would be through an enterprise fund, where we've talked a little bit to the park department. The park department seems interested in taking a role, maybe similar to the role that the Board of Selectmen kind of have had over the 5-year period in terms of the rink and the oversight of it, and set it up in an enterprise fund where it would have to be a self-balancing, that the user fees would have to pay for the costs, and we'd have to have the ability to set rates that would cover an operating budget, plus debt service. So that's the idea of it. And we figure we should at least get the ability to have the enterprise fund. If the 25-year lease never comes to fruition, then at some point down the line, we'll just disband the enterprise fund. But hopefully it will.
Now, have we actually voted to submit this one, or do we need to take a vote on this tonight?
We need to take a vote on this.
Okay. So we haven't actually voted to submit this one. Do we want to vote to include this in the warrant? Tom has done the work on this and worked with town
Yeah, we
council,
should.
I think, on this article. But-
I'd agree with that.
So would someone like to make a motion to
We're going to call
submit
it
Article
9?
N9?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we submit Article N9 for the May town meeting.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Articles 10 and 11 relate to the Swift Hat Shop. Article 11, we have 3 different variations on this, and that grew out of a conversation that Anne Marie and I had with Town Council John Flynn the other day. Article 10, these are essentially, even though we've got 2 modifications on N11, these are essentially the articles that came up last summer and that we considered submitting for the October meeting. We initially submitted them, we pulled them out because there was still some research being done. Article 10 would transfer land at the intersection of Wharf Street and Adams Street from the Board of Park Commissioners to our board for general municipal purposes. We had to do some legal research on this. The town administrator and I had a call with John Flynn the other day. He's been working extensively with Bill Clark on issues relating to the Swift Hat Shop. There's a number of issues that are still open on this, but John's advice to us was that the land currently is under the management and control of the Board of Park Commissioners. So there was a question raised about that last summer. So the Park Commissioners, for the past 100 years, have been maintaining that property. There was an article from 1912 or 1913.
18.
Right, yeah, I recall.
Transferring that to the, from a Milton Landing Committee, I think, to
Right.
the
At
Park
least
Commissioners
certainly the
for
land
management.
certainly the land with not boathouse, but the
The yacht club.
yacht club is, yeah.
So I spoke with Stephen Affanato, the chair of the Park Commissioners, to see if they were still of the same view, that they would be willing to transfer this property to the selectmen should we decide to go forward with a donation and a move of the Swift Hat Shop to this site. I met with, that's why I was a little bit late coming up here. I met with them just before this meeting. They're meeting downstairs, and they had a brief discussion about it, and they are still of the same view that they do not want the responsibility and the cost, basically. They have really no use for the Swift Hat Shop, but they're willing to transfer this land to the Board of Selectmen for us to maintain and receive for the transfer of the building. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things that would have to happen, still a lot of issues we have to figure out, including what the owner, Mr. Roberts, wants to do with 98-100 Adams Street, which is his property. The planner, town planner Bill Clark, has met with Mike Roberts, I think fairly recently, Bill? I think you're going to be having, or you've had some follow-up discussions.
We'll be having more. We've started discussions, we'll have more.
Okay, so we're still in the situation where we've at least confirmed that the land is under the control of the Park Commissioners. They're still willing to transfer it to us. I emphasized when I was at their meeting tonight that, you know, they may want to hold off on any kind of a vote to transfer it to us, because it's possible that we could accept the building and it could be moved to a different location. It's possible that maybe we'd try to see, and Bill has asked Mr. Roberts if we could leave the building in the current location, and if there's a way it could be preserved in its current, at the current site. And there's a lot of different things that still have to happen there. I think we thought when we removed this article back in September that by the time January rolled around and we were closing the warrant, we'd have some more pieces of this pinned down. There's just so many moving pieces that we haven't really advanced the ball too much since September, but we've at least done some. Bill has done a lot of historical research on the site. He's talked with Anthony Samarco, Mr. Crone, and others about.
So we're reasonably
history of
convinced
the
that it's
site.
not the site of the Suffolk Resolves?
Well, maybe Bill can speak to that.
Are we or not?
It depends which picture you're looking at.
Okay.
It depends which people you're talking to. We have pictures that date back to the 30s that show a different building on that site. Not a park as it's defined right now. We know that the Suffolk Resolves House was where Citizens Bank is now. We have hearsay that the building was moved from up the hill down to the hill, down to its location where Citizens Bank is.
Okay.
So its present move would have been the third place it
Gotcha.
would have resided.
So it's possible that the original site could have been that.
It could have been, we're not sure. We're listening to hearsay. Even the original owner, it was his grandchildren that was saying, well, that house was, he owned, Daniel Vose owned a bunch of different buildings down in that area. Several of his buildings wound up getting moved up to High Street. So there's a lot of pieces that have been moved around over time. We're still looking at the ownership issue. There's lots of issues in play. Mr. Roberts is not in a hurry to tear the building down. He would like to try to find a way to, make something come to fruition.
Right. I mean, the bigger concern, I guess, is the longer it sits, the longer it's just kind of exposed to the elements and everything, and not being really maintained, although it is fairly tight at this point, but.
At the same point, we're talking about a 4,000 square foot lot that is both Mr. Roberts' present house and the Swift Hat house together is a 4,000 square foot lot.
Right.
I know that Mike did have to do a lot of work to his own house. He put a new roof on a couple of years ago, or last year. I know the Swift Hat house probably needs a roof, too. I know it needs a foundation. I mean, these are all, how do we do this? Where do we do this? We're having those discussions, they're just slow. I mean,
Yep.
if there was a funding source that said, I'll give you the money to do it, that becomes a different issue.
Have we approached Mass Historic? I know I asked a couple of times, but have we approached Mass Historic to see if there's any interest in that building?
Well, a resident who was here in the room, Joanna Spinks, did get an historic designation, and I
Well,
don't
yes.
believe it was Mass Historic,
No.
it was
Preservation Massachusetts.
Preservation
Right.
Massachusetts. So,
Mass Historic is the one that
Yeah.
did
yeah, that's a whole different process and a
Right.
different level.
But
So-
I don't know why we're not doing that, though. I mean, why not approach them? Why not ask them if there's
Well, I
any
think we should
interest?
talk with our historical commission about that. They're very interested. I've spoken with Stephen O'Donnell, and they're very interested in saving the house. I think a number of things really need to happen, but the largest piece here is what happens with Mr. Roberts' property, and we've talked about that before, and we really need the planning director and to have some follow-up discussions with Mr. Roberts. The issue is, do we submit these articles tonight? We have a number of citizens, and some of them are here tonight at Citizen Speak, who are very committed to trying to preserve this house. This board has indicated that we would like to try to preserve this property.
I say yes, we submit them and get the ball rolling.
Can I ask a question, Bill? Mr. Roberts, he applied for a demolition permit, is that correct?
He did.
And then he was put into a, is it a 9-month?
9-month delay,
Delay?
Yep.
That's expired?
yes.
So he has the right to go in and get a demolition permit tomorrow if he wanted, is that correct?
Yeah.
I believe so. I don't know that they'd make him go back because he didn't do it within a certain period of time, but I believe he could go in and get a demo permit to take it down now.
He could take it down tomorrow if he wanted. Okay. So I think we should submit the articles as soon as we can, so that there isn't any more delay for Mr. Roberts in particular.
We want to show, good faith in working with Mr. Roberts. He had, there's a contingency. Obviously, it depends on what can be done with his property as to whether he can afford to pay for a move. But it is still a generous offer that he's made to the town of this property, because he does have the right to demolish it. I think we're in virtually the same situation where we've had a few questions answered since we took these articles out of the October warrant, but we're in pretty much the same situation, that the articles, there's still a lot more information and a lot more that has to be done. But the question is, it's January, we're talking about May. We have a few months where we may be able to, we had talked previously about appointing a committee. I know I suggested that wasn't the most popular idea at the time, that may be something that we want to reconsider, because we really need someone who's got a preservation background in construction, or preservation construction. What's the term, Dennis?
Historical preservation?
Historical preservation, but it's someone in development and construction who we could use some expertise in that area to serve on a committee if we were to appoint a committee. That's something. Is there any further interest in appointing a committee to do some of the work on this and to try to resolve some of these issues? I think we also need to ask.
Preservation aspect, I'm not sure about. At some point in time, how we're going to pay for it, what is the use going to be?
Mm-hmm.
I know, that obviously, Joanna over here has expressed, desire to use the place, and I think her plan, sounds very interesting, and I mean, you've got to be properly capitalized and everything, but it's probably not going to be an inexpensive building to maintain and keep up.
No, and there are fundraising sources that we can talk with about potential donations.
A committee to kind of pull that together.
Yes.
But and I can certainly see that. The preservation architect side of it, I mean, maybe that's best left once you figure out what the use is. I mean, at this point, I think the more important thing is securing the rights to the building, and And once we know we can do that, then before we accept the gift, making sure that it's feasible.
Yes. It was just suggested that we might want a preservationist on a committee, if we were to appoint a committee to bring some of that expertise
Yeah.
to reuse of the building and what could be done there.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you want to maintain the exterior of the building, because from a
Yeah.
historic
So-
standpoint, that's the most
so
important.
The question I think for us is, there's a lot of interest among some residents. There's also opposition to moving the property to this particular site. So we've heard from various points of view. We've also heard other locations, including the town farm, suggested as a location for this particular building if we were to accept a gift of the building. The question for the board, I think, is are the articles in that category that we talked about a few weeks ago, that they're not ready to go to town meeting at this point? Probably, but because there's so many issues
I guess
available.
what harm is it going to do, you know? And, the ability to accept a gift doesn't mean we have to accept a gift. At least it gives us the authority to do it.
It's conceivable the articles could be referred back for further study.
They could
They're
be.
not, and that has happened with planning board articles sometimes and with other articles, but we also, someone at the government study committee meeting last night and talking, I think it was about the selectmen, the 5-member selectmen article, mentioned, if we want to put it forward, that gives an opportunity for discussion on it, for debate, to move it forward. That might be an approach we take here, but it's possible, I hate to say it, it's possible we could wind up putting the articles in and pulling them out. It's possible. The Historical Commission chair even suggested maybe we don't submit the articles now, but we reopen the warrant at a later date if we think a month from now that we're in a better position to add them at that time.
Well, that mightn't be a bad idea, actually.
We could always
It's
do it
really-
the other way,
it's
too,
the-
leave them in now and
yeah,
pull them
it's
at
the
a later
same
date.
thing.
if you want.
There's uncertainty. None of us want to see the building demolished, and it's probably unlikely that that's about to happen anytime soon, but we don't know that for sure. Mr. Roberts wants to know what can be done with his property. We'd like to see, Bill,
Well,
maybe getting him in front of the townhouse, kind of, maybe discuss mixed use for the site. There should be options that, he's interested in doing a housing development of the site. Maybe, you've talked about mixed use at the site.
Right, I did invite Mike to that meeting. He did go to the last meeting. The next meeting of that group is tomorrow night. So, we'll,
Was there discussion about this property at that group?
not about that property, this is a townwide approach to townhouses and condos.
All right, so so we've had articles drafted. If we were to submit them, we have 3 choices for Article 11. The first one identifies the Wharf and Adams Street location. The second one does not identify that specific location, just refers to town-owned property. The third one, which may be the more ideal one, refers to just accepting the gift and contingent upon the donor transporting it to and installing it on property located in the town. That way, if there were a private property or some other
Yeah, maybe the best.
option that may not be town-owned property, and then that gives the warrant committee a little more
I would say yes.
leeway for their recommendation, rather than identifying a specific site. They could still identify the specific site in a recommendation. But the third option is the most general of the articles.
I agree with that.
So there are pros and cons to submitting these articles. What's,
Just from my own knowledge, what's the harm in putting the articles in and pulling them out on the floor? Is
By
there
the time they hit
something
the floor, you
you can't
can't.
pull them out on the floor, you could just send them back for further study or
Send them
vote
back.
no. We could take them out anytime before we actually
print.
go to print. And that happens, we've talked about trying to avoid some of that, but it has happened.
In the interim, I mean, I guess if we can find the people that want to volunteer, and maybe somebody from the Historic Commission might want to, to do 2 things. A, approach Mass Historic and see if there is any interest, so that at least we kind of know if there might be, 2 things. Number one is at least a small source of funding to maintain the outside of the building, giving them a conservation restriction on it, or I don't know what they call those restrictions, that, you can't touch the outside of the
Oh,
building.
preservation restriction.
Preservation restriction, yeah. And then be looking at at potential uses of the property. While we're going forward with,
So would we want to consider a committee to work on some of these issues? With, I think when I initially proposed it, was maybe have a member or two of the Historical Commission on this committee, maybe somebody with expertise in construction or preservation or real estate.
yeah,
A neighbor from the Milton Village area would be ideal, since that neighborhood would have an interest.
yeah.
We probably could take up how we'd want it, what a charge for a committee might be, or any, we could do that at a later date, but that's something that we could, is there an inclination to do that?
I would have an inclination to that, yes.
To take it up at a later date?
Well, we could take it up at the next meeting if you want to appoint a committee. We could, since we're on TV, we can ask if anyone's interested in helping us with the Swift Hat Shop. We know some people who are interested, but if there's anyone else who is a resident of the Milton Village area, has an interest in historic preservation or expertise in an area that might be helpful, who might want to contact the board in the event that we do appoint a committee.
But, again, maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but we have a piece of land that the Parks Department is ready to give us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have the owner of the property willing to move it onto that property.
Yes, but the cost of moving it,
But he's going to move it.
yes, but what he can develop on his own property will really determine how he can afford, whether he can afford the cost of moving it, and how far, that sort of thing.
But assuming we move it next door onto it's the cost of moving a house. I moved plenty of houses. It's cost no more than 25, 30 grand,
There are residents who have expressed a concern about moving into that site because my understanding is a number of residents from the Milton Village area back in the 1960s or 50s or some time ago wanted the memorial place there, wanted the park and the stairway and the open space there. So, and there's a question too of how would moving the house to that particular location impact the open space, the view of the landing, different issues like that, and the redevelopment in general of the landing. We still have the yacht club there with a lease that we need to take up at a future date together with the park commissioners. So there has been some opposition to moving it to that site. That's what I'm saying. It's not general. There are supporters and there are objectors. And we haven't had a lot of, we've heard from a number of people, we haven't really put this out for broad public comment as to, do people support the move from the current location to the proposed location? That Mr. Roberts is the one who proposed that. Bill has talked with him about the possibility of keeping the property where it is and consolidating it into a future development there.
You'd have to agree not to change the exterior of the building in order to do that, and I don't know if that's feasible to do that and get what he wants to get out of it.
Yeah. So the question for us right now really is, should we submit the articles at this time?
In my opinion, I say yes, and I'll tell you why. Because we knew this in October, right? We knew that we were going to be doing something with the Swift Hat House. Yet really nothing has got done, and you said that yourself, Katie. I think if we put a timeline on it, submit the article, we have till May to get it ready, or till the printing. I think it'll force people to do something, whether we're going to move it or not.
It's not that nothing has gotten done. I mean, Bill has spent a fair amount of time doing historical research, interviewing people like Anthony Samarco, who's a local historian, and others. And town council spent some time working on this with Bill and checking into the control, who really had the control over the location.
You know, the old saying goes, if you want something done, put a time limit on it. You know, if we delay this again till October, you know, we'll be during the summer wondering if we're going to make the October meeting.
So Dennis, you're in favor of submitting the articles?
I would, and then just before you go to print, if we have to pull them, we'll pull them. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that.
Okay. So since the board, I am a little concerned that they're not properly ready. They're not ready, but at the same time, we're continuing to do a lot of work on this, and there is a genuine interest in trying to preserve this building. We've lost the Milton Women's Club. We've lost the old St. Elizabeth's Rectory. Other properties.
But all we're putting out there
have
is
been
the
lost.
ability to accept a gift.
That's right. That's right, and the ability to accept a transfer of the land
Right.
from the parties. It's an authorization, really, and even if we were to get the authorizations,
Doesn't
it may
have
be
to
a long
happen.
time, or whenever, we may never ever exercise them. So they're really authorization articles. So if we were to submit 11, do we want to choose the third option?
Yeah, I think
Yep.
so. That gives us the most flexibility, yeah.
All right, so then do we have a motion to submit Article 10, N10 and N11, the third version?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are on to N12. This is again, a Board of Selectmen article. Have we already voted this one? I think we agreed on this one at the last meeting.
Yes, we
Yeah,
did.
Okay, so this is to appropriate money for the reserve fund in case we wind up spending a substantial amount of it on the demolition of the Henry's building. Again, this one may or may not be needed, but it's probably wise to submit it. Article 13, the town administrator might be able to say a few further words on this. This is the Safe Routes to Schools article.
Yes, this is, as you know, last October, you had an article in to accept easements at each annual town meeting, which allows you to accept easements throughout the years. However, throughout the year. However, with this Safe Routes to School, it was the town engineer was informed by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation that this had to be done as a separate article because this was a separate project, and there may be some in-kind payments to do these easements. So we had to include this as a separate article, not to be included in that, I hate that term, boilerplate easement article.
Right.
And this will be submitted by the Board of Selectmen.
Yes.
So we'll just add that to number 13. So do we have a motion to submit Article N13?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 14, is this the one you're giving a presentation on?
Yeah, a quick one, but
Okay.
pass these out. Okay, this kind of came, and it's probably the first time that people on TV are hearing it. But, we've been talking for a while. We know we need, we know we've been talking about fire stations and new fire stations or rebuilt fire stations. But either way that it happens, and we are going to have a study done to determine, location and basically everything all the way up to a design plan, but not including a design of the 3 fire stations. We know there's going to be substantial cost to that. We know we need a new DPW facility. We know that, again, it's going to be a substantial cost. We know that all of those facilities are anywhere from poor condition to deplorable condition, depending upon, which buildings you're looking at. So, what we've been talking about in the capital committee is, well, how are they ever going to get funded? And then those projects are not going to get funded within the tax rate, under the, what's called under the levy limit debt. There's not enough room under the, you would bankrupt the town trying to do that without what's called a debt exclusion override. So right now, in fiscal 2015, the taxpayers are going to pay $2.8 million approximately in debt exclusion. That's for the library and the schools and, for the most part, those two things. That is the debt service for 2015. Each year, that number comes down a little bit to by the time you get to 2029, that will be the final payment on that debt, and will go to zero. So people's taxes will come down for that period of time. But then at some point in time, we're going to say, okay, voters, now we're looking for $50 million or $30 million or a number so all of a sudden now your taxes are going to spike back up again. So the thought is, and so that's one problem. The other problem, if we don't want to increase people's taxes beyond what they are now with the debt exclusion, we would have to wait till somewhere around 2023 or 2024 at the earliest before we could even contemplate any of these projects. So on the capital committee, we started talking, well, what, is there a different way? And the one way I thought of is, right now the taxpayers are paying $2.8 million in debt exclusion. And, that's built in, that's been coming down a little bit every year. So what if we went out to the voters and said, okay, we'll guarantee for a fairly significant period of time never to increase your debt exclusion beyond $2.8 million, that we'll hold it steady at that rate.
Can I ask one question? When you say debt exclusion, just for the guy who's not an accountant.
Debt exclusion is an override to pay for debt that's not being paid for under the tax, well, it's in the tax rate, but it's not what's called under the levy limit, non-exempt debt. So in other words, we have two debts, the schools, and we went out for an override vote, issued debt, and the tax rate for that debt is set to equal the amount of the debt service payment.
Okay.
So it goes out. So like I said, that payment in 2015 is going to be $2.8 million. If we guaranteed never to, for a very long period of time, to hold that steady, not reduce it but not increase it either, as that debt gets paid down, the taxpayers are still paying at the $2.8 million level. We set up a special purpose stabilization fund for the purpose of DPW facilities and fire stations. We bank the savings between the actual debt service on the school and library and the $2.8 million that the taxpayers are paying. And that screen up there, if you can see it, and this thing shows that if we did that, if we assumed a 4% interest rate on the bonds, by 2021, we could probably issue a $14 million bond. We would, at that time, have about $1.3 million in a stabilization fund, just from the difference between what we're paying in debt service, the excess that we kind of built up. So that's going to carry us to make sure once we issue that $14 million bond, there's still $2.3 million of debt service we're paying on the schools. So it's going to spike the actual debt service payment for those few years beyond that $2.8 million. We use what's in the stabilization fund to bring it back down to the 2.8, so it doesn't cost the taxpayers anymore. And then sooner or later, because the debt decreases, the debt on the schools has fallen off, then you're back down to that $2.8 million level, and then you drop below it, so the stabilization fund starts building back up again. And then in this model, in 2027, you could do about another $22 million. So before the school debt is fully paid off, you will have been able to issue $36 million in new debt and never raise the debt exclusion to the taxpayers beyond the $2.8 million. That's the idea of it. Talked to Lisa Dickinson today, who's our bond consultant, and the only thing that she said when she looked at it at this point is we may need a vote from town meeting because a special purpose stabilization has to be set up for a special purpose, and it has to be set up for a limit on the capital project. So at a minimum, we'd probably need that. The way our article is right now, all it does is it kind of leaves it a little bit looser than that. So we might have to name that, we're setting up this special purpose stabilization for the purpose of aiding in the construction of fire stations and a DPW facility, and set a cap on it.
So is this something, presumably town council wrote this article for us?
Town council wrote the article.
Them on it, I'm guessing?
But now we're going to have to, and we're going to do this over the next 2 weeks, we have to vet it with DOR and bond council to make sure that it's in proper order.
So we may have some changes to the
Yeah, we
wording
might.
of this
We
one
might.
to clarify some of that.
But that's the gist of how it works, and you can see that you start out with a small amount of money in the stabilization fund. It builds up fairly quickly because each year the debt's coming down. Then 2021, when you issue the $14 million, you start taking money out of that stabilization, to the tune of 400, 300, 200,000. So you're basically bringing that stabilization fund down to almost zero, and then it starts flipping the other way and starts building back up again, giving the ability in 2027. So essentially, in 5 years from now, we could potentially start funding a reasonable amount for, fire stations. So that's the idea.
Well, I know you've talked about this before with us, Tom, and this is a great example of thinking outside the box and thinking creatively. And I never would have come up with something like this, so this is, glad we have an accountant on the board to do something like this. And come up with this idea.
I guess my question, Tom, is,
Yeah.
what is the advantage of putting excess money into this account you're talking about versus borrowing when you need it?
Well, you could do it either way. It would take you longer, because if you said, okay, well, we don't want, taxpayers are paying $2.8 million. We don't want to go back when they're still going to have to pay $2.3 million in the school debt and ask them to pay another $2 million in debt for fire stations, and ask them to pay $4 million now. And their taxes will have been coming down for those 5 years, and all of a sudden they're just going to spike right back up again. So rather than do that, why not just say, here's a level where you might not like it, but at least you're paying it now. So we'll guarantee we're not going to make it go up any. We'll keep it where it is right now, at the level that, and I hate to say comfortable with, because I don't think anybody's comfortable paying taxes, but at least a level where it's not going to rise above.
So should we vote to submit this, subject to you, Tom, working with John Flynn and Lisa Dickinson and anyone else to make the appropriate changes to this that are needed over the next couple of weeks?
Yep.
Okay, then do we have a motion to submit Article N14 to the annual town meeting warrant, subject to further changes?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion then?
You'll need to have, to really have a good presentation ready.
I know, just to explain it to people is tough enough.
But it bears repeating. I think, thank you on behalf of the board for the thoughtful analysis that went into this, and for coming up with a creative solution that we'll see how town meeting feels about it. But I said to somebody yesterday, about 10% of what you do is done at a public meeting, and 90% of what we do is outside of the meeting. And this is a perfect example of that, because this is something you've had a lot of meetings and conversations with
talked
people
about, and I've been thinking about it.
Yep.
But, this would be both a home rule petition and probably have to go out for taxpayer, for general
vote on a ballot?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so a motion has been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Article 15, this is a home rule petition for a liquor license for the Plate Restaurant at the Milton Marketplace, which is going to be their second location. I spoke with Bob Sheffield to get some additional information on this one, just because he submitted this to us not as a citizen petition, but asking the board to submit this article, which is, he tells me, is what he's done in the past with articles like this. So I had thought initially this was just a breakfast and a lunch restaurant, but Bob tells me it's going to be dinner also, so full breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He did tell me the Board of Appeals approved hours until 9:00 p.m. for the restaurant.
You anticipate having a bar or just a service
It'll be dinner
bar?
and a sit-down, and you can get, no bar, I don't think.
Just a service bar?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so he's asked us to submit this article. It's in the form of other home rule petitions for liquor license that have been issued. I did speak with Senator Joyce, because he had raised the issue at the last town meeting about a moratorium. He was aware of this at the time and said that when he mentioned that Milton has gone from 0 to 5 for East Milton Square alone within a 2-block radius in a very short period of time, this was one of the ones that he was referring to. So there's really not an issue there with the issue about the moratorium, but he raised a good point, that within a 2-block radius, we'll have Abbey Park with a liquor license, Mr. Chan's, the sushi restaurant, the potentially new Falcone restaurant, and then this one. And this is something that, as you mentioned at the last meeting, Tom, Senator Joyce raised this as well, that when the board issues the license, not now at this stage where we're approving the home rule petition article, but when we're actually issuing the liquor license, that following up on some of the conditions that are in those liquor licenses and in making sure that we're enforcing, whether it's something like a 2-drink maximum before somebody's seated and orders a dinner.
Whatever it may be.
We want to make sure, whatever it is, something like that, we want to make sure that that's enforced, especially for residents in the area in East Milton Square who are, who have seen a dramatic change in liquor licenses in that area in the last 10 years or so. So do we have any discussion on this one, or?
Is that commercially zoned property, or is that residentially zoned with a variance?
Yes, residential zone with the variance.
I say we submit it and let town meeting make the decision.
So do you want to make that motion?
I'll make a motion that we submit Article N15 for the May town meeting.
Second.
If no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Article 16 is a citizen petition that seeks a moratorium on neon and LED signs. We have a number of signatories listed. So it's a citizen petition. There's nothing that we need to vote on that. Article 17 is another citizen petition, which I'm guessing came in today?
Yes.
This is a condominium planned unit development article. It's a 10-citizen article.
Do we have a copy of that?
It's at the back of the
It's on the
package,
back of your
N17. So again, there's nothing we need to vote on this. This would be a general authorization of the planning board to grant a special permit for a condominium planned unit development.
And this is at the hillside?
Bill, can you,
Could be Hillside, it could be Canton Ave.
Okay,
I don't think, it's meant to be more of a general
I see.
article, so, and again, that's a citizen petition that apparently just came in today, so nothing we need to act on for that one. So we will be putting these together with all the so-called boilerplate articles, and within the next week or so, getting these to the warrant committee. But I think it bears repeating, and I do think we want to thank the Town Government Study Committee. They've driven a number of these articles, and
Yeah.
we're moving forward on a lot of different fronts, so that's
Yeah,
good
which is
news.
good,
So
yeah.
we're making some real progress here. All right, then we are back onto the agenda, number 7, the financial analyst candidate approval.
Move to approve the appointment of Lisa Cool of 41 Robbins Street to the position of financial analyst in the central business office, contingent upon approval of the personnel board.
Thank you, Bill.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? This is
You might want to speak to, this was part of the reorganization.
This is a new position created under the reorg plan that you approved at your last meeting. This is a clerical union position, so it did have to, we did have to abide by the requirements in the collective bargaining agreement, so it was posted 7 days internally, 7 working days. We had 5 candidates that applied for the position. 4 were interviewed, 1 dropped out before the interview process began. And the interviews were conducted by the town accountant and the assistant town administrator. There was a really detailed skills test on Excel and on balance sheets to make sure that this candidate that was chosen had a good working knowledge of the accounting and financial world. And Ms. Cool did excellent on that testing. So the town accountant and the assistant town administrator would like to put her name forward. She's currently the senior admin clerk in the park department. So if she is chosen, we will have to post that position, and we will continue to give some support until someone fills that position. Lisa will continue to give some support to the park department in the
I
interim.
think she's a great candidate. Just going through her resume, you know, as a guy who went to school for 5 years at night as an adult trying to, you know, build a business and raise a family and get my Bachelor of Science degree, it kind of upsets me a little bit that she's one
I know, I was thinking the same
class
thing.
short of a Bachelor of Science degree.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like to see her finish that.
I would
She
too.
is planning on taking that course, yes.
Because she did finish in '88.
So it's
20
not that- Yeah, it's a long time, but not
And while she's
long ago.
currently employed as the principal clerk in the park department, she's got experience here for a good number of years as the assistant controller, a billing manager, bookkeeping, so she has a good background, it would seem, for this
Oh,
position.
there is no doubt about
Yeah.
that. It's
Yes.
just that
Yeah,
I don't know why somebody would leave one class short, you know? You go for 4 years and you leave it one cash short.
Yeah. No, I wasn't really speaking to that issue,
Yeah.
more just that even though she's working in a different department, in a different capacity at this time, she's got
Yes.
a good background for this financial
Absolutely.
analyst
Looks like
position,
she'll
and
fit it well.
I'm sure will be a big asset to Amy and her department.
Yes.
So the motion's been made, was it seconded?
Yeah.
Okay. Then any other discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We've acted on number 8. We are on to number 9, which is a motion to approve the No Place for Hate proclamation. We'll be, probably, I'm guessing all of us will be attending the Martin Luther King Jr. celebration on January 19th at the Concord Baptist Church, and this is our annual proclamation.
I'll make a motion to approve and sign a proclamation reaffirming the board's support of the No Place for Hate program in the town of Milton.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
I think we were there last year, Katie, and it is a very good night.
Yeah, it's a great event. It is.
You have all the different denominations there, and
And we'll read the
It is.
proclamation out.
read the proclamation. I guess Chief Wells is the keynote speaker.
Keynote speaker.
Yes. Okay, then, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are on to the town administrator's report.
Yes, Madam Chair, I just wanted to inform the Board of Selectmen that on Tuesday, December 30th, the town closed on the Deer Run Lane property, and that deed has been recorded. So it is now under the care, custody, and control of the cemetery
Great.
trustees.
I'm sure the cemeteries are happy.
Yes,
I'm sure they are.
We're all very happy.
yes.
It actually extends the lifetime of the cemetery by about 12 to 15 years.
Yes, it is. It's a
Great.
huge accomplishment. And
And thanks, not to take your time here, Emery, but
no, go ahead.
a big thank you has to go out to the Copeland Foundation.
Absolutely.
Again, for donating the $175,000.
It's on my list.
Yeah.
You finished
Yeah.
my sentence.
I thought you were done.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
And in addition to the Copeland Foundation, thanks also to Dennis Cohane, who was the chair of the board at the time. We took that on, and so Dennis, I know you had quite a
This was near.
large role to play in getting this to the finish line, and also to town council John Flynn, who spent a lot of time working with the seller's attorney on this. So a great result for the town, for the cemetery, and for the town. And so thanks to the Copelands, to Dennis.
And actually to the seller as well.
Marie, to the seller,
The seller,
and to town council.
he held in there,
Yeah.
when he could have pulled out.
Yep.
I think the trustees are very pleased
It's a huge
to have
accomplishment.
this closed and under their control now.
Yep.
So that is good news. Anything else on the town administrator's
Yes, I
report?
just wanted to quickly, because I know the hour is late and we have executive session, but I did want to quickly let the board know that the town is in the process of refunding approximately $4.8 million in general obligation bonds that were issued in 2005 related to the school building project. We had a conference call today, town officials along with Unibank financial advisors. We had a conference call with Victor Medeiros of Standard & Poor, and the purpose of the call was to update Standard & Poor's on our current financial state as well as our future outlook for the town. The call consisted of updates on matters such as new growth projections, budgetary performance, and financial policies and procedures. And it was extremely positive, and they were extremely pleased to see that we are still making it a priority to fund our reserves, and they were really happy to see that. Standard & Poor's is providing feedback to the town approximately around January 9th, so hopefully we'll get that rating.
I think it's going to be very favorable in terms of bond rating. From
I thought the
what
call, yeah, I thought the call went really, really well.
Yeah, well, the bond rating, which will kind of drives the interest rate too.
Okay.
Well, along with the market itself. But the one thing that was very clear from it, though, is the importance of formal policies. And the fact that we really do have to make a concerted effort to revisit the 2007 policies and,
Financial
Yes.
policies?
yeah, and
Yes.
get them up to date.
We need to bring those back.
Well, and that's something maybe we should target for later this month or February, at least to begin looking at and
Yes.
Yeah.
to address. We've talked about doing that, but it
I mean, they
hasn't
were
been on our-
pleased with the policies we had, the fact that, the formal ones are still in place and still being adhered to, as much as possible. And the new informal policies that we have, in terms of the capital policies of the
1.9%.
1.9% trying to keep the debt service at a level rate and let it grow as revenue grows. Was a very positive one. The other changes that we made in capital committee to more formalize the process, they were impressed with, and the 5-year forecast is certainly impressed with.
They were really impressed with the 5-year forecast, and they would like to have a copy of that once the Board of Selectmen has had the presentation.
The pilot.
So we committed. We
the
did
pilot
send.
committee, we sent the
We
PowerPoint.
sent the PowerPoint on the pilots.
So,
Did they have any changes to suggest to the policies?
no,
No, they don't do that. They just listen to what we've put in place.
So should we target January 21st, maybe that meeting to, I think we should probably circulate them. I don't
Yeah.
have a handy copy of them
they're on the
readily available.
website, I believe, but
Yeah, I think they are, but why don't we,
January
maybe we could gather all of them together and circulate them to the board in advance and take that up for discussion on January 21st to see what, some of them might, maybe no changes at all to some of them, but we could at least review them and talk about them and discuss whether we need any changes or if there's any other board we need to consult before we make any changes. And even if we make none, at least the fact that we've reviewed them
Review
and
them.
decided nothing needed to be changed is a
Yep.
good thing to report at the next call.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's it, Madam Chair.
The only thing under the chair's report I have is I had a conversation with the warrant committee chair, Ted Hayes, over the weekend. Obviously, this is the time of year the warrant committee's really focusing on the revenue projections, and they've gathered all the budgets, and they're putting their spreadsheets together. So I think the warrant committee is concerned about the budget outlook for fiscal year 16. So the town administrator and I are going to meet with the warrant committee chair this week to just sit down, go through the initial spreadsheets, the accountant, a few other people, and kind of get a handle on what they're projecting. I know we're going to have the financial forecast that was just mentioned at an upcoming agenda where our board, as everyone knows, took a little bit of a different view than the school committee did. We've viewed that more as a management tool to be presented to the board. The school committee wanted to vet the school numbers, so the school committee is reviewing that and weighing in, and I think they're voting it this week or next week. So we'll have that as a tool. When do we think that would be? You think the 21st, Anne Marie?
I would like to be able to target it for January 21st.
21st, okay. So that's something that could be presented then, and that will really inform the budget as well. And I think we'll have more as we go on.
it probably a help. Again, it's a different basis because it's level service and kind of contemplates some additions that may not actually come to fruition because of funding issues, but
Yeah.
and it kind of shows you, our belief if revenues grow the way we think they're going to grow, and if expenses grow, and we try and maintain what we consider to be level service by vetting it out with all the department heads, that we've got a gap,
Serious gap.
and the gap grows.
Yes.
Yep. Yep. And we're at the stage where we have a change of administration coming into the state level, so we don't know what the state aid will be. It's a little premature, so they're holding that at a steady dollar amount.
Some Lumen 9C cuts, perhaps.
Yeah.
So it's
So I think we'll have a little more information on the budget as we sit down and meet with the warrant committee chair and have the 5-year forecast. Does anyone have anything else to report?
Nothing to
Tonight.
report.
Okay, citizen speak response?
For the most part, the SWIFT hat, I think we pretty well vetted out that, we certainly agree with all the citizens that got up and spoke. We certainly want to stay at the place, and I think we're doing everything we can to move towards that goal.
A lot of work to still be done. Anything else on citizen speak response for tonight? Future agenda items, we've touched on a couple. We are still trying to get the sign review committee to come in and meet with us. The town administrator and I talked about the fact that we'll probably at one of the later January meetings put on a follow-up to our meeting last January about the town administrator's goals and objectives, just to do some follow-up discussion on that. Other future agenda items besides the financial forecast and the,
Was that last January we met?
yes.
Yeah.
In your office, Tom?
Yes, it was, yeah.
Yeah.
Past year.
Time flies. So do we have other items that anyone wants to bring
I can't think of any at this
forward
point.
at this point? Okay, then if not, I will move that we enter executive session. I have a motion.
Go on here.
but to,
Oh, no, we don't, yeah.
Purpose of-
for the purpose of discussing litigation, Thayer Nursery, and releasing executive session minutes, believing that having this discussion in open session would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the body, and to return to open session to adjourn.
Good job.
Second.
Say that so many times you remember it.
I never do, so.
Second.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Hurley,
Yes.
and me, yes. Okay, we're in executive session.